So you and I, we're about to go on a little adventure together. That adventure is going to span 118 years of Tudors, and it's going to be one generation at a time. How does that sound to you? I'll be your host this evening. My name is Christina. Thank you for joining us here at my Tudor Era Tapestry. On a crisp November morning in 1487, Queen Eliza stood beneath the soaring arches of Westminster Abbey. Her tall, slender frame moved with a grace that stilled whispers, her cloth of gold gown shimmering as if woven from the sun itself. Eliza was no mere ornament, but a rose entwining York and Tudor. At 21, her beauty was a quiet storm, her tall, slender frame, draped in cloth of gold that gleamed like a promise, moved with the elegance of a king's daughter. Each step a measured dance through a realm still raw from war. Eliza's coronation was a tapestry of hope woven with thorns. The crowd's cheers rose up like a tide through London's frost-kissed streets, yet shadows lingered. Yorkists whispered of Lambert Simnel, a pretender crowned in Dublin, as Archbishop John Morton anointed her, her delicate hands clasped briefly as if holding her father's dream of a healed England. Her voice clear, yet warm, greeted nobles and maids alike. Eliza's thoughts flickered to her son, Arthur, born a year past, his tiny hands a thread tying her to this new dynasty. She stood, not just as queen, but as a beacon, her beauty a vow, her heart a prayer for peace. Her coronation a fragile step toward a realm where roses, red and white, might bloom as one. Her coronation was resplendent, but her role was clear: to bear heirs, to bind wounds, to be the queen her father's dream had demanded. Her son Arthur was already a golden thread in the Tudor weave, his infant laughter a promise of stability. Yet her eyes, soft but searching, flickered with the knowledge that her Yorkist blood made her both a savior and a threat, watched by Henry's wary court. Eliza's days unfolded in the quiet splendor of Greenwich and Sheen, their halls warmed by tapestries and the murmur of lutes. Her voice, clear as a bell, yet softened by warmth, greeted courtiers and maids alike. Her smile, a gentle shield, masking the weight of her crown. Henry, ever mindful of her lineage, kept her influence tethered, her role more ceremonial than commanding. She poured her heart into piety, her rosary beads a rhythm of solace, her offerings to abbeys a prayer for peace. At court she glided through feasts and progresses, her golden hair catching candlelight, her laughter a melody that eased the tension of a dynasty still young. Yet whispers of a rebellion followed her beauty a magnet for both loyalty and danger. In private, Eliza's thoughts turned to her mother, Elizabeth, now in seclusion, and to her cousin Maggie, a child bearing her shadowed name. Her own family grew, her love for Arthur a fierce, quiet flame. By late 1489, her body carried another hope, her pregnancy a whispered prayer for the Tudor line. The court watched, its breath held, knowing each child wove the dynasty tighter. On November 28, in Westminster's hushed chambers, Eliza labored beneath velvet and candlelight, her delicate hands gripping the bed's edge as midwives murmured encouragement. A daughter emerged, Margaret. Her cries, a new note in the Tudor song. The babe's arrival sparked joy, though a daughter's worth lay in alliances yet to come. The name was no mere whim. It honored Henry's formidable mother, Margaret Beaufort, the steely matriarch whose Lancastrian blood and unyielding ambition had carved the path to Bosworth's victory. Eliza saw in her daughter's name a bridge, not just between York and Tudor, but to the women whose prayers and plotting had crowned her husband king. Margaret, with her sharp mind and devout heart, was a towering presence, her influence a constant pulse in Henry's court. Naming Meg for her grandmother was a nod to that strength, a vow that this child would carry the weight of both houses into a future where alliances might heal England's scars. As she traced Meg's tiny fingers, Eliza's smile held a flicker of hope, her heart weaving prayers for her daughter to inherit not just her grandmother's name, but her resilience, to bloom in a realm still shadowed by its past. Meg's birth was a thread of light in a realm still filled with thorns. Eliza saw in her daughter a future where York and Tudor might truly blend. The jousts and feasts that followed crowned were a fleeting glory. But Eliza's thoughts lingered on her children, on the brothers she had lost, on the fragile peace she had carried like a prayer book. As queen, mother, and symbol, she walked her path with grace, her beauty a beacon, her heart a shield, her legacy blooming in the tiny hands of Meg. On a hushed November evening in 1489, Margaret Beaufort stood in the flickering glow of Westminster's candlelit halls, her dark eyes alight with rare grace. Quiet warmth as tidings came of her granddaughter's birth. The child, Princess Margaret, Meg, was named for her. At 46, Margaret's slight frame, cloaked in dark black velvet, bore the weight of a lifetime's cunning and sacrifice, her face etched with lines of years of prayer and plotting. In the weeks following Meg's birth, Margaret's days unfolded in a quiet storm of purpose. Her chambers, lit by firelight, were strewn with parchment, letters to allies, accounts of her estates, and notes on the court's pulse. Margaret's heart, a fortress of faith and resolve, beat fiercely for her grandson Arthur, now 3, a golden-haired boy whose delicate frame and bright eyes carried her dreams. Meg's arrival was a spark of light, a promise of future alliances. Her tiny hands a vow to mend a realm still scarred by civil strife. Margaret's thoughts often turned to her son, King Henry, whose crown she had secured through years of exile. Now, as mother to the king, she guarded his legacy with a hawk's eye, her letters to him sharp with counsel, her presence at court a quiet force. Eliza, with her Yorkist charisma and gentle poise, was a necessary ally, her womb the crucible for Tudor heirs. Yet Margaret, ever wary, knew the court watched Eliza with both awe and suspicion, her lineage a beacon for rebels. As November deepened, Margaret's gaze sharpened on a moment she had long envisioned: Prince Arthur's investiture as Prince of Wales, set for November 29, 1489, at Westminster. This was no mere ceremony, but a crown upon her life's work, a proclamation that the Tudor line would endure beyond her son's reign. Arthur, at 3, was her heart's hope, a small boy with his father's solemn eyes and her own unyielding spirit, his golden curls a mirror of Eliza's radiance. To name him Prince of Wales was to claim the ancient title of England's heir, a mantle steeped in the legacy of Edward I's conquest and the Black Prince's glory. For Margaret, it was a defiant act, a stake driven into the heart of Yorkist pretensions. The title tied Arthur to the land's deepest roots, proclaiming him the rightful successor in a realm where pretenders like Simnel had dared challenge Tudor legitimacy. She saw in Arthur the fulfillment of her Lancastrian dreams, a boy who would rule a united England, free from the wars that had torn her youth apart. Her own father John had died in disgrace, her mother's remarriages a lesson in survival. Margaret had learned early that crowns were won not just by blood, but by will and reputation, and Arthur's investiture was her will made manifest. Margaret orchestrated the ceremony with a strategist's precision. Her letters, penned in a firm hand on crisp parchment, summoned nobles from across the realm, their presence a show of fealty to her son's crown. She ensured the abbey would gleam with splendor, tapestries of red and white roses, candles casting a golden haze, the air heavy with incense and anticipation. Her own attire, severe yet regal, reflected her role as the dynasty's silent pillar, her dark eyes scanning the gathered lords for any flicker of disloyalty. The court buzzed with preparations, and Margaret, ever watchful, conferred with Henry's advisers, her counsel sharp as a blade. On the day of the investiture, Margaret stood in Westminster's soaring hush, her thin lips curving faintly as Arthur, small but steady, knelt to receive his title. The scent of myrrh clung to the air, mingling with the chill of ancient stone, as the boy was named Prince of Wales. His tiny frame draped in velvet, his eyes wide with a child's wonder. Margaret's heart pulsed with a fierce, quiet triumph, her rosary beads still in her pocket, their rhythm a prayer for endurance. She glanced at Eliza, radiant in her queenly grace, her golden hair catching the candlelight, their shared love for Arthur a fragile bond across the divide of York and Lancaster. The air was thick with tension. The last Prince of Wales had been this little boy's uncle, who went missing from the Tower at 12, the Queen's younger brother. And the one before that was killed on the battlefield at 17, neither ever becoming king. Being the Prince of Wales was a high-risk occupation. For Margaret, this moment was a vow kept, to her lost supporters, to her God, to the son she had raised to be king. Arthur's title was her legacy, a beacon to silence rebels and unite a fractured realm. Its light carried in the frail hands of a boy and the tiny namesake, Meg, whose future would one day weave peace beyond England's shores. On a frost-laced morning in 1489, Elizabeth Woodville stood in the shadowed grandeur of Westminster Abbey, her silver-gilt hair veiled beneath a delicate gauzy shroud, her once radiant face now etched with the quiet grief of a mother and queen dethroned. At 42, her beauty lingered, pale skin like moonlight on the Thames, hazel eyes sharp with a survivor's clarity, yet dimmed by the weight of her Yorkist legacy as Edward IV's widow. Clad in somber damask, her tall frame moved with a grace tempered by loss, a faint echo of the courtly splendor she once commanded. The investiture of her grandson, Arthur, Prince of Wales, was a moment of fragile triumph, but it stirred like a tempest of conflicting emotions in her heart, a tapestry woven with pride, sorrow, and the unhealed wound of her missing son. At 3, her grandson Arthur stood small but solemn, his golden curls catching candlelight, his tiny hand clutching a velvet cap as he was proclaimed heir to the Tudor throne. Elizabeth's lips curved faintly, a flicker of pride warming in her chest as she gazed upon her grandson from a distance. He was her blood, a testament to her daughter's strength and her own relentless maneuvering to secure a future for her line. In Arthur's delicate features she saw traces of her late husband, King Edward IV, and the promise of a dynasty reborn. Yet the title Prince of Wales pierced her like a blade. For the last to bear it had been her son, Prince Edward, a golden-haired prince stolen from her, vanished into the tower's shadows alongside his brother Richard. The memory of her boys clawed at her, a grief she carried like a stone. Her daughter Eliza, beautiful beside King Henry, her poise a quiet victory. Elizabeth's heart swelled with love for her daughter's triumph, yet it ached with the cost of her survival. She had schemed and sacrificed to place her family on this path, but the price, her sons, her power, her peace, haunted her. The investiture was a moment of glory, yet it forced her to confront the ghost of her Edward, the true Prince of Wales, whose fate remained a wound that time could not close. Pride in Arthur warred with the sorrow of what was lost, leaving her to stand in the Abbey's chill, a queen of shadows, her heart torn between the living and the gone. This was a rare outing for the Dowager Queen. Exiled to Bermondsey Abbey in 1487, Elizabeth's world had shrunk to cloistered walls and whispered rumors. Her status as Dowager Queen, a hollow title under Henry's wary gaze. She had been a queen who shaped a dynasty, her marriage to Edward IV a scandal that birthed Eliza. Now was England's hope. But the Tudor court, with Margaret Beaufort's sharp-eyed vigilance, kept her at a distance, her Yorkist blood a silent threat. At Bermondsey, her days were woven with prayer and needlework, her chamber warmed by a single hearth, its smoke curling like her memories of Whitehall's laughter and her husband's golden reign. By spring of 1490, Elizabeth's solitude at Bermondsey deepened as whispers of a new threat crept through the Abbey's stone corridors. A young man, Perkin Warbeck, had emerged in Ireland, claiming to be her son, Richard, Duke of York, escaped from the tower's doom. The rumor struck her like a blade, her breath catching as she stood by her narrow window. Gazing over the Thames' gray ripples, her fingers delicate but warm traced the edge of a worn prayer book, its pages soft from years of touch. Could it be true? Her Richard, her sweet boy with her husband's smile, alive after years of silence? Her heart surged with a mother's desperate hope, yet her mind, honed by years of courtly intrigue, cautioned doubt. Warbeck's claim, backed by Yorkist exiles in foreign courts, was a spark in a realm still tinder dry from civil war. Elizabeth knew the danger, and this pretender threatened to unravel that fragile bond. Margaret's letters, sharp with suspicion, reached her even in seclusion, urging vigilance, as if Elizabeth herself might fuel rebellion. Her days grew heavier, her prayers more fervent. She walked Bermondsey's cloister, her steps slow, her black gown brushing cold stone, her thoughts a tangle of hope and fear. She had faced Richard III's shadow, survived Sanctuary's confines, and seen her daughter crowned Queen of England. Yet this new spectre tested her resolve. Her hazel eyes, flickering with doubt, scanned faces of her maids. Were they spies for Henry, watching for a mother's treason? She wrote to Eliza in careful script, her words veiled, offering love, but no promises, knowing each letter was read by Tudor eyes. To hope was to risk her daughter's throne and her safety. To doubt was to bury her son again. As spring turned into summer, she stood alone, her heart a vigil, her beauty a fading flame, her prayers a plea for truth in a realm where crowns were forged in lies. In the spring of 1490, Maggie Plantagenet stood in the soft light of Eltham's palace windows, her chestnut hair catching the sun's tentative rays. At 16, her beauty was a quiet blue, pale skin, kissed with a faint rose flush, her delicate hands tracing the worn edges of a prayer book, its pages soft from her mother's long-gone touch. The air held the scent of damp earth and blooming hawthorn drifting through the stone corridors. Yet her mind, sharpened by years of loss, cautioned doubt, each rumor a thorn in a realm still bleeding from civil war. She bore the Plantagenet name like a fragile crown, her father's treason and her brother Edward's imprisonment in the Tower a constant ache. Maggie's life at Eltham, under the vigilant gaze of King Henry's court, was a delicate dance of courtesy and confinement. Housed with her cousin Eliza, now queen consort, and her children, Maggie was a lady of rank, but never free. Her days were spun with needlework, the pluck of lute strings, and the rustle of silk as she moved among Eliza's attendants. Her laughter, a bright note that faded when Warbeck's name surfaced. The court thrummed with unease. Warbeck's claim, now whispered in Ireland's halls, was a dagger poised at the Tudor throne, and Maggie's Plantagenet blood made her a silent threat. She overheard maids speaking of her aunt, Elizabeth Woodville, cloistered at Bermondsey, and wondered if the Dowager Queen declared hope for her son's return. Maggie's own hope was a flickering candle, dimmed by her father's execution, her mother's death, and her brother's captivity. As 1490 turned into 1491, Warbeck's whispers grew louder, his claim gaining echoes in foreign courts, and Maggie felt the court's eyes sharpen. Margaret, Henry's intimidating mother, watched her with a hawk's intensity, a reminder that Maggie's lineage was both safety and danger. Eliza was kind, but distant, her role as queen a barrier between them. Maggie doted on Arthur, the 3-year-old Prince of Wales, his curls a mirror of his mother's, his laughter a fleeting balm. Yet the court's tension seeped into her dreams. Warbeck's shadow threatened Eliza's fragile dynasty, and Maggie, caught between loyalty to her Yorkist past and survival in a Tudor world, felt her heart twist. She walked Eltham's gardens, her gown brushing wet grass, her thoughts a tangle of hope for her cousin's survival and fear of what his claim might cost. Her prayers grew fervent, her rosary beads clicking in the chapel's hush, each bead a wish for peace in a realm where her blood was both a crown and a chain. By spring 1491, as apple blossoms drifted over Eltham's walls, Maggie's fate shifted. King Henry, seeking to bind her Plantagenet blood to his cause, arranged her marriage to Sir Richard Pole, a loyal Welsh knight, half-cousin to Margaret Beaufort and a trusted servant of the crown. At 17, Maggie faced the match with a quiet resolve, her beauty now tempered by a woman's poise. Richard, nearing 30, was plain but steady, his dark eyes kind, his modest status a stark contrast to her royal lineage. She was a princess. He was a knight. The wedding, held in a modest chapel, was a quiet affair, the air thick with the scent of spring flowers and wood smoke. Maggie stood in a gown of pale blue, her chestnut hair braided with silver threads as she spoke her vows. As she clasped Richard's hand, her heart held a fragile hope, not for love, but for stability, a life where her children might grow free of the shadows that haunted her youth. Maggie, now Lady Pole, stepped into her new role, her prayers shifting to a future where her Plantagenet blood might bloom in peace, even as Warbeck's whispers lingered like a distant storm. In the tender light of spring, 1491, Meg Tudor, barely a year and a half, lay cradled in the warmth of Greenwich Palace's nursery. Her dark eyes darted about the room. The air carried the scent of fresh rushes and warmed milk, mingling with the faint lavender pinned to the swaddling cloths that wrapped her tiny frame. Daughter of King Henry and Queen Eliza, Meg was a delicate rose of the Tudor dynasty, her auburn wisps of hair curling beneath a linen cap, her giggles a fleeting melody in a court still shadowed by unrest. Named for her grandmother, Margaret Beaufort, she was a living emblem of the union between York and Lancaster, her existence a quiet vow to heal a realm scarred by wars. The nursery, with its tapestries of blooming vines, hummed with the soft steps of nurses. The nursery's warmth shielded Meg from court's tensions. Yet whispers of Perkin Warbeck, a pretender claiming to be her lost Uncle Richard, drifted even here, a shadow over her mother's smile and her grandmother's vigilant prayers. Meg, unaware of the weight of her name, played beneath the watchful eyes of nurses, her small fingers clutching embroidered blankets or reaching for the sunlight that spilled through the leaded windows. Outside, Greenwich's gardens burst with apple blossoms, their petals scattering like promises of peace. But the court remained uneasy, its lords murmuring of Warbeck's claims in Ireland and Burgundy. As Meg babbled and toddled, her heart unburdened by the crown's thorns, she was a fragile hope in a fragile dynasty. Her laughter a prayer for a realm where roses, red and white, might bloom as one. In the tender spring of 1491, the Alhambra Palace in Granada bloomed with the scent of orange blossoms, their delicate petals drifting across the sun-warmed courtyards, where 5-year-old Catherine of Aragon, Infanta of Spain, played under the watchful eyes of her mother, Queen Isabella of Castile. The palace, a marvel of Moorish architecture, with its intricate tilework and bubbling fountains, was alive with the hum of a kingdom at war. Catherine, her auburn hair catching the light like burnished copper, darted through the court of lions, her small hands clutching a wooden doll dressed in silks, a gift from her father. Her laughter, bright and unburdened, mingled with the splash of water in the fountain. At 5, Catherine was already a child of two worlds, her mother's Castilian fervor and her father's Aragonese pragmatism, shaping her young mind. Isabella, clad in a velvet gown of deep green, its hem embroidered with golden pomegranates, often drew Catherine to her side in the shaded alcoves of the palace. There, amidst scrolls and maps spread across an oak table, the queen taught her youngest daughter the fundamentals of faith and duty. Catherine, her dark eyes wide with curiosity, traced the letters of her name on the slate, her small fingers gripping the chalk with determination, already sensing the weight of her royal blood. The spring air carried whispers of diplomacy, for even as Granada's siege tightened, emissaries from distant England arrived, their strange accents filling the halls with talk of a betrothal. Catherine, too young to grasp the full import, overheard fragments of her name linked to Arthur, Prince of Wales, a boy a year younger than her. In the courtyard, she sat on a stone bench, her nurse, Beatrice, weaving stories of England's green hills, painting a land of mist and chivalry. Catherine's imagination flared, picturing herself a queen in a far-off court, her doll now a scepter in her tiny hands. Yet the realities of war were never far. At night, she knelt beside Isabella in the palace chapel, the scent of incense heavy as they prayed for victory, the glow of votive candles casting shadows on the Virgin's serene face. Catherine's days were a blend of play and purpose. She learned to embroider, her stitches uneven but earnest, under the tutelage of her governess, while her older siblings filled the palace with their own vibrancy. Juan, the heir, teased her gently, tossing her a ripe pomegranate from the gardens, its ruby seeds staining her fingers as she giggled. But it was Isabella's presence that anchored her, the queen's resolve a beacon. One April morning, as almond trees bloomed in shadowy clusters, the Alhambra, its arches framing a sky of endless blue, was her world, a place of beauty, faith, and the faint stirrings of a future that would carry her across the seas to a throne she could scarcely imagine. Her small figure, clad in a simple linen gown, stood poised between a child's joy and the weight of a crown, her mother's prayers and her own dreams weaving a tapestry of hope beneath Granada's radiant sun. You can share your thoughts with me at longlivethequeenpodcast@gmail.com. Slide into my DMs on Facebook or Instagram at longlivethequeenpodcast, or join the party on Patreon, where we have extended episodes and bonus content.